everyone in the binder, you do have a copy of our minutes from the August meeting. So if there are any questions or comments, we'll take those now.
Make a motion that we accept the...
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Okay. Minutes are passed. Okay. The big bulk of our time today is going to be spent on evaluating this resolution to approve the budget and design matters for the enclosed football stadium that is rapidly popping out of the ground behind us here. Monica, did you have anything you wanted to say for us before we get started and pass it to Jeff and Heather?
Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. I mean, I think the only thing I would say is you're going to hear from an illustrious group of advisors. I mean, we really have been very fortunate to be advised well during this whole process. And so as Metro Legal and Jeff, our bond counsel, and Heather Hill and the Cumming group come up and do this presentation, I mean, I would say that I have every confidence in them. They really have really delved into this material, and they've asked all the questions. I'm sure Heather's tired of me because we talk, it seems like, all day. And so I just, their recommendation, their thoughts, I really just have a lot of confidence in them. So they want to make sure that you all are comfortable with the information, that it's presented well. So please ask questions as we go. We've got enough time, I think, to dig in well.
We've allotted an hour and a half, so as you have questions, just please go ahead. If you guys would allow us to interrupt you every now and again, that would be helpful. And with that, we'll pass it to you.
Good morning. I'm Jeff Oldham, Bassbury & Sims, counsel to you and Metro related to this project. So I thought, let me say what I heard her praise to be was a fancy way of saying, y'all don't mess this up. And so we'll try not to. Let's do a little inventory first. You got a you mentioned the resolution, and sort of where we're going to land is the resolution. Let's just start there for a minute to make sure we're all looking at the same thing. So it says a resolution. It's in your binder. I think it's labeled resolution. And so let's just walk through it real quickly. The whereas clauses, I'm not going to walk through those, but what they do is they tell the history of this transaction. And the history really starts in August of 23 when this board approved all of the stadium documents and the issuance of bonds for the project. And those proceeds got parked, in escrow, not technically in escrow, but parked in escrow until we get to this date. This date is, if everything goes as planned, called the funding release date. That's the date when those proceeds, both the state's bonds and your bonds, those proceeds are released and available to be used to fund the project. That's the backstory. So what is in front of you today? We just go through these sections one at a time. Approval of 50% construction plans. So those were sent to you, and we got this is like the real professional here on everything construction related. Heather sent those to you, I think, a couple of times in a link. It's a thick set of stuff, and she's here to talk about those. So you have those by link. There was the GMP amendment. You'll remember this board approved a construction management agreement. And so that's been in place now for quite a while. The GMP amendment is an amendment to that construction management agreement that locks in a maximum price for a really big chunk of the stadium project as a whole. And we'll talk about the project. Heather specifically will talk about the project. It's more than just the stadium itself, but it is primarily the stadium itself. So there's that GMP amendment that was also sent to you in that same link. The next item is approval of an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. That is a side agreement, if you will, between the authority and Stadco, essentially relating to, we sort of all acknowledge that it's a really big thing, and we are approving some things here sort of midstream in the process. And are there things along the way that we need to asterisk to basically say, we are good for today's purposes, but we've still got some more work to do. And so that's what the MOU does. We'll talk about it in much more detail. That's in your binder under Memorandum of Understanding. The next item is approval of project budget. And that is in your binder under the Cumming Group letter. The second page of that tab has the summary of the project budget that's going to be in front of you. The next section is acknowledgement of the sufficiency of the capacity documentation. As I read that, that's one of the worst captions to a section ever. Sorry. So that part of the deal was, we were saying to bondholders is when we issue bonds, we're issuing bonds now. We'll release the money when we're sure we've got a project budget that has a guaranteed max price contract, and we're certain that the team has the funds sufficient to fund their share of things. So the sufficiency of their funding is you have two firms, Inner Circle Sports, Greenberg Traurig is a law firm, Inner Circle Sports a financial firm. They've both been engaged by you since 22, really, to advise you. They have since August been reviewing the team's financial capacity, mainly through NFL and bank loans, to make sure that that they have the money to do that. And so there are two letters in your binder. One is Greenberg Traurig letter. The other is Inner Circle Sports certificate. Those are in your binder, and those are letters to you that sort of basically say, yeah, we've reviewed their financing and think they have sufficient funds. So that's in front of you. That's Section 5. Section 6 is there's really not a document here, but all of this, and I said, and we're going to talk about the background here and give you the context for this, is sort of wrapping it all up and say, yeah, because all those things that we just talked about, the first 5, sure enough, we've hit the funding release date. And then in Section 7 is a math thing, the catch-up achievement amount, and I'll go into it in more detail. The basics of it are this. Once we get past this date and we start funding project costs every month, the idea is that everybody would fund their pro rata share of a monthly requisition, and pro rata would be in proportion to everybody's contribution. So your contribution was $760 million. You remember the state's contribution was $500, and the team's contribution is, then you get the PSL piece, and then the team's got the balance of the project budget. And so every month we're going to pull on those pro rata. The catch-up achievement amount is intended to sort of square up the fact that the team has spent a whole lot of money to date. And so if we just started pro rata next month going forward, they'd be out of kilter, because they would spend much money. And so there's a catch-up amount where the other funding sources catch up to what they've spent. And then once we've caught up, then we go pro rata. So that's what's going on there. So I've now given you sort of the laundry list of the resolution and all of the exhibits, and if I can answer any questions about that. But what I'm getting ready to do then is to go tell the story a little bit from August 23, so that you see this resolution in context and see where it is. But
can I ask one question
absolutely.
about the catch-up process? Yeah. Is the catch-up process that you're describing as it pertains to our portion of the investment a simple drawdown on the escrow that's already there, or are we waiting for additional bonds to be bought or traded, or no?
No, all of the money
It's
is
all
there.
there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On May the 18th of 23, we reaffirmed the request for approval, something that the council had recommended to do. Can someone tell me what that is? But I've slept since May, and I don't remember what that was for.
Yeah. So the transaction, and you're making me go way back in history now. I'm trying to get this right. So the sequence of events back in the spring of 23 was that this board approved a set of stadium documents first, and then all that package of documents went over to the council. The council made some changes through their approval process. So what we did in May was to bring those council changes back to you so that you reaffirmed what you had already approved, but with the council documents, so that everybody had approved exactly the same thing.
So we just approved what they approved.
Exactly. Yep. So I guess I'm gonna start heading back sort of to the history of things, and we've got a slideshow that'll help do that. So I mentioned the funding release date. That again, this is the date where the Sports Authority and the state money can be released. This date, I guess the way I'd like to think about it, is sort of a roadmap, and this is a roadmap that you approved back in 23. And so let's go to the slides first. I think maybe that's the best thing to do. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is 2023, and this all sort of centers around a development and funding agreement. And that one actually was well named because it contemplated two things: the development of a stadium. And so when we talk about the development of a stadium, one thing that agreement said is who's going to be responsible for designing it and constructing it. And the way we cut the deal was that's going to be the team's responsibility. Your responsibility and rights under that agreement as it relates to design and construction were to approve a lot of stuff. So the engagement of the architect, the engagement of the construction manager, oversight of construction draws, oversight of DBE and workforce provisions, the right to engage Cumming Group to act on your behalf to help do all that stuff, and for the cost of Cumming Group to be paid as part of the budget and not out of your pocket. So that was the roadmap for development that was approved in August of 23. The second thing the agreement did, if you want to go to the next slide, is it was a roadmap for how the thing was going to be financed. And so you see it there, and you've heard it 100 times, but let's just go through it again. The state was to contribute $500 million of bond proceeds. The Sports Authority was to contribute $760 million of bond proceeds. There was going to be a PSL contribution amount, and then the team would fund the balance of project costs, whether as part of the budget or as cost overruns that might pop up after the fact. That was the plan. So then and that roadmap said, okay, well, before the Sports Authority issues bonds, takes the first step toward that, we're not going to do it on a whim. We're not going to do it hoping that things work out. We're going to do enough diligence on the front end to feel really good that we've got something that will work. And so before you, and the document lays these out, before you could issue bonds, the team had to provide for you, and you had to approve a preliminary design and budget. And so they did that. And so there was a $2.1 billion stadium budget that this board approved in August of 23 that had a design associated with it. They had to come to you and say, okay, time-wise, we've got a schedule that thinks that we believe we can get that GMP and the final budget to you by October 1 of 2024. So they brought that schedule. And then they also had to show our Inner Circle and Greenberg, our advisors, evidence that they had financing lined up an amount sufficient to cover their portion of the budget. So all that got done in 2023. And only after all that stuff got done did you guys then issue roughly $700 million of bonds. And so go to the, so those bonds got issued on the same day, or roughly the same day, the state of Tennessee issued its general obligation bonds. And so the Sports Authority's got, $760 million of proceeds sitting over here. The state's got $500 million of proceeds sitting over here. And so there they sat. And so if we go to the next slide, so then the roadmap then, actually one more slide, sorry. So the roadmap then said, okay, well, we did a whole lot of diligence to make sure we think we've got something live. We've sold bonds telling bondholders that they're going to have a stadium that has certain attributes that can generate certain revenues and can be constructed on an appropriate timeline. And we've told bondholders that the team has the capacity to fund their share of costs. So we feel really good based on the diligence we have in August of 23 that that's true, but we're not going to release the money until we're darn sure that all that stuff is true. And so the process from August of 23 to now is to sort of prove all that up. And so the funding release date, the date when the state and your money can actually go live, is the date when that GMP has been delivered, and now you have project budget certainty, and the team has confirmed that those term sheets and the financing that they had sort of proved to us on the front end still hold. And so that's why, as we go back to the resolution, those things that are in front of you are the GMP, the project budget, the 50% construction plans that underlie all that, 2 letters from Inner Circle Sports. That's what's going on. It's just the next landmark on the roadmap, for the financing. So that's the backstory. The documents say if all that doesn't happen by October 1, everything unwinds, the bonds get repaid, and we're back to square one. And so there is a hard October 1 deadline, and everybody has been working sort of diligently to make sure that we get this done before that deadline. So that's the funding release date. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the professional and let Heather talk about what has, that's the roadmap. And then particularly from a development and pre-construction perspective, what has gone on since August of 23 to get us to this point? And we may have at some point team folks up here to help have that discussion, and I'm going to turn my mic off.
Good morning. So in looking after Jeff kind of walked us through to get to August, now we kind of turn the page of what's happened from August till now, and as you all know, a lot of work to prove out all of the things that we felt pretty solid about a year ago. So there was a preliminary budget. The architect of record was brought on board. That's TVS. The general contractor, TBA, and as Jeff mentioned, you all approved the construction management agreement, and the 50% design drawings were approved as well by the board. So what we're doing today is we're taking that next step. And so we're looking at, and I'll get a little deeper, we're going to let, as Jeff mentioned, the Titans come up and talk a little bit about their process, because I think it's important to hear what all went into the numbers and the information you're hearing today. Is part of today will be the 50% construction documents. That's also called the GMP set. That was issued at the end of May this year. That was provided, and that is what the TBA's amendment to their agreement is setting their GMP based on. So that says this is what we're going to build for this number. So that's why that's part of this package. And I'll talk in a little bit through that process and what is different and isn't different in that set. Then we've got, as I mentioned, the GMP amendment. We will talk through that a little bit, and then as well as the project budget. That's what, again, is on today's docket. So I'd invite the Titans up to speak a little bit about the GMP process and what it's taken to get us here on that piece.
Good morning, Burke Nihill, President and CEO of the Titans and Nissan Stadium. I am not the right person to walk you through the process, so I will in a minute invite the person who is. I did want to take an opportunity, though, to thank some people and reset a little bit about our process and how we got here more generally. First, I'd like to thank a whole group of people, and I've written some things down because there's just way too many, and I was worried I'd forget people. First is Kellen DeCourcy, who you will hear from in a minute. He's our executive project manager. It was the best advice I've ever received on a project like this, is to hire somebody like Kellen to care deeply about keeping a project on time and on budget. And the man deserves a month of vacation coming up soon. And unfortunately, he's not going to get it, but we could talk about it. But he's just really done yeoman's work, and he's partnered with CAA Icon in the process. They've just done an incredible job. TBA, our construction manager, we've had some hard conversations because these are hard processes, and they have at every point stepped up to be the partner that we believe that they would be, and they're a big reason why we're here at this moment. Cumming Group, thank you. The work that you've done in challenging us and supporting the process has been amazing. The mayor's office, the mayor himself, certainly, but Bob Mendez, Jeff Oldham, Tom Cross, others with Metro that have just given just so much time to this project, and it's been humbling, and the work has been great. And then last but not least, of course, is the Sports Authority. You all have been our partners for decades, but in processes like this, we appreciate your partnership, your perspective, your challenge, and so we'd be remiss without thanking you. To reset a little bit to the moment that we began to explore the possibility of pivoting to a new stadium, we set a challenge that was almost unfair, I think, which was to build a world-class stadium that represented Nashville well, and also to do it with a budget-driven process. And we have not wavered from that, and the results that you hear about today make us proud, because we're pleased that we've been able to deliver that. This building is beautiful. It is going to make this city proud, and amazing things are going to happen in this building for this community because of that building. But we've been able to do it in a way that I think is different than a lot of other projects like this, where we have maintained that budget-driven focus, and while not compromising on that world-class standard, we've been able to be zeroed in on that budget. We have made decisions over the last year or so that we've made very intentionally to future-proof the building or to enhance fan experience, and we're proud of those decisions, but nothing has wavered about our commitment to a budget-driven process. We are pleased to have landed in the range that we expected to land, and to share more about that, I will invite up now Kellen DeCourcy.
All right. Thank you, Burke, for that glowing review. It's great to be here again. It's exciting to do this with you all a second time. So I'm really excited to explain a little bit about the GMP process. Obviously, it's been a long road to get here, but I will assure you that it's been a very thorough and measured process. We really could not have gotten here today, as Burke had said, without the commitment of project partners such as yourselves, Metro, Cumming Group, and the Sports Authority. But the project really took the next step and the next level once we were able to select TVS as our architect of record and TBA as our construction manager. It was from that point there that we were able to take the Manica design concept drawings and make sure that we were able to prove the feasibility and the reality of the project, while ensuring that we had the cost alignment with the design, which is extremely important as we move through the design process. We wanted to make sure that the costs were able to cover all of the program elements that we need in a building of this type. So once we had the Manica design concepts, we had the TVS design team deliver a series of design deliverables that you'll see here on the timeline. And then ultimately those design deliverables were complemented by a robust estimate at each deliverable by TBA. And each TBA deliverable on their estimates involved all of their industry expertise, their data on the market, their historical pricing, and then also involved the input of the market subcontract community. And each estimate deliverable was the result of many weeks of work and assembly, and then ultimately followed by many more weeks of review and analysis by the Titans, CA Icon, the Cumming Group, and the design team to ensure that the right design scope, the right design assumptions were captured. And so ultimately, we're very confident in the GMP proposal and amendment that is in front of you today, and assure you that it's run through a very organized and thoughtful process, and that it is a responsible price for this project, for this scope of a building of this generational impact. So we're very excited. Thank you.
Thanks, Kellen.
All right.
Any questions on the GMP process or anything from Kellen? Okay. A lot, right? I gotcha. That works. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So let's jump into a little bit more detail. So, as was mentioned, you all received a link with your packages last Friday from Monica. I sent that again yesterday. But I know it's a lot of information, including thousands of pages of drawings. So I want to talk a little bit about the design process and what's occurred from the time you approved the 50% set to date. Nothing of material change has occurred, with the exception of what Burke kind of mentioned, which is some future proofing. They've really looked at the building. They added some mezzanine area and really have been thoughtful to say, this is the time, let's design it in, let's make sure we're being flexible and future thoughtful to what these spaces could be. They will just be what we call core and shell, meaning they're not finished out. At least that's the plan right now. but the spaces are there and ready to go, that after the building's operational, if there is a need or something that can fulfill, the space is ready to go. You would have electrical, mechanical, everything run to that space. So you're basically just painting and finishing it out, and you're not trying to really build within what will be an operational stadium. So there's been a lot of thoughtfulness to things like that, a lot in the technology realm as well, especially in food service, for how they're thinking about the end user and the technology that is always something you're chasing in a project that has a 3-year term. As was mentioned by Kellen, also within that time frame, we saw TBA and their partners, so mechanical, electrical, plumbing subs specifically, your other, you get your other big subs on early, and those guys are sitting in the room with designers. We had plenty of all day, multiple day work sessions where we went through the plans, and they were looking at it and saying, okay, but if we could do this, the labor force, that's a way this makes sense in the field, right? There's drawing it on paper and there's building it in the field. There's also material choices and things like that. This is more readily available. This is more, user-friendly. Things of that nature. That's what's going on in those work sessions, as well as everybody kind of looking across and saying, well, this was drawn on this page, but it didn't carry over. We need to make sure we're coordinating drawings. So as drawings progress, they're not, and we say evolving, they're not necessarily changing to what you expect. They're getting into the details. They're making sure that what architectural has drawn, what electrical has drawn, what structure has drawn, all come together. So when everybody's out there building their parts and pieces, it all comes together. So the details are happening. That all has gone into the set that is part of this that we received at the end of May. There were 2 addendums that came out subsequently to that is also part of the GMP amendment. And those 2 addendums, one was food service. The Titans continued to work with their partners and honing in and getting that scope and what they wanted to buy in those areas and what the best needs, meeting those needs would be. And so that addendum didn't make it in the 531 set. It came about a month later. But bidders had that, and the TBA had that to work through this summer as well. And then that other piece where I talked about, as you get into the drawings and you get multiple folks in the drawings, you start to coordinate across different scopes to make sure that everybody is building what is wanted. So that was the second addendum, where it was basically aligning, coordinating between the different scopes.
Heather, could I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
I think we all certainly understand that one of the challenges that we're confronted with is trying to nail down a value and a cost basis at a certain point in time. The GMP is the gross maximum price, correct?
Guaranteed maximum.
Guaranteed maximum price, excuse me. We are now being asked to amend that to a higher number. Is that correct?
That is correct. The project budget and the GMP within the project budget are up from the original.
Can you tell us to what percentage they are up and contributing factors as to that increase?
Sure. I think that a few things is that added scope, those added areas that they're building in. I think you saw some technology numbers go up, a little bit in the material escalation. Things are a lot more predictable now than they were maybe a year or 2 ago, but you still have a little bit of that that occurs as a project is going through the steps that Kellen laid out.
And this is not my area, but when she gets to the project budget, there is a side-by-side comparison of the original and the updated, where you can see line item by line item where those changes have been.
Yeah. That's further questions. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we'll get to that quickly. So needless to say, that's where the construction drawings are. We have received what is considered the permit set. You don't typically hear it called the 100% set, but essentially it is. And that is the permit set. It has gone to the city and all the departments within the city. That was issued on 8/30. As you can imagine with the timing, that is the next thing we'll get to. It's not part of this package. We, everybody, TBA, Titans, everybody was honed in on the package and the scope we knew. We do not expect anything to material change between what we know right now and that 100% set, but there will be a review period, and we will be bringing that back to the board once that review is complete and comments have gone back and forth.
And when will that be? That's not an October 1st, obviously.
No, it's not an October 1st. Nothing today is dependent on that. We are going to turn our comments back in by the end of this month. Like I said, the city has it. We would like to see the city's comments just to ensure that everybody's good and there's no surprises, none are expected.
Can
I
I
think it'd be
for just a second? I was going to do this at a different point, but I think it lands here nicely. One thing is, I want to make the point that what you're doing today does not terminate your rights and responsibilities and the activities this board's going to undertake for this project going forward. You still have all of the continued approval and oversight rights, and you're going to be monthly dealing with this. It doesn't stop today. Today is an important midpoint step, but it doesn't end things. So I just want to make sure you are doing some things today. There's some other things you aren't doing. You're not ending your oversight.
I think one of the things I'm trying to drive towards is ultimately understanding for this group, when is the number locked and when can we rely on that being the cost basis going forward, regardless of other variables that are yet to be determined today? When is that time?
So I think what you're going to hear today, and I'm not going to get too far ahead of us, but what you're going to hear today is we all believe in this number, the number you're seeing today. We do not expect when the 100% comes out or review is completed that there's going to be another budget. That's not to say things don't happen, but TBA is going to be signed up to this GMP once approved, meaning they're under a guaranteed maximum price. What that means is we basically, in my mind, my simple mind is unless we add another floor to this building or we add on a substantial or a material amount to their scope, we don't expect they are held to their GMP. And that is the bulk of this project. Obviously, other things can contribute and move the number, and we can go through those. But the biggest portion of this, we're locking today. We're locking all of it today. I apologize. But the biggest portion is now under contract once this is approved.
And then beyond today, any cost overruns land at
the Titans.
On the Titans.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So if you'll go to the next slide, let's walk a little bit through the budget, and I may pull Kellen back up if we hit some questions, but I'll do my best with it as well. We've been sleeves rolled up for weeks now in the budget and in the numbers, specifically the TBA piece, but all of it.
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
May I just point of clarification? You said beyond today on the cost increase. Is it who's responsible for the cost increase? Can you clarify?
All cost overruns, unless city driven, are by the Titans, no matter if it's today or part of what you see today.
Thank you. I think that is very important to clarify. Thanks.
So what you'll see, and this is on the second page of the coming report, I dropped a table in there, is I compared that previous budget, that $2.1 billion budget, to what is being put forth today, which is the $2.235 billion budget. And I want to highlight a couple of things. We'll dive into anything you want to dive into. But the big drivers are the construction piece. You'll see there's a considerable bump there. We've talked a little bit about the moves in scope and things of that nature in that line, as well as the FF&E piece. So some things that are going on in FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, equipment. So your food service is in that. So when I talked about a little bit about that thoughtfulness to the technology and how those food and beverage areas are being contemplated, there were some increases. Digital signage belongs in that bucket as well. Pull this up. As well as any furniture, OSB OS&E, which is another alphabet soup one, and that is all of your pots, pans, silverware, all the things you got to have to now work in those spaces. And I don't want to just hone in on food and beverage, but that is a considerable piece of it, as well as digital signage, and then communication and technology are big pieces of that budget. And again, Titans looked at this budget and said, there's things we need to be doing better, or we want to do differently. We want to look forward, and they increased this budget. And as previously mentioned, that is on theirs to pay for that overage. But that was how they looked at that number. We've sat with them and looked through, because this category is not like the construction category where there is a GMP. This is more, a lot of this is budgetary. We've looked through proposals with them. We've talked through the logic. We've looked at other like projects and what those budgets and actuals came out to be, and are satisfied with what we've been told is considered in this budget for the FF&E.
Are there any questions on the budget? Do you guys want to start with that? Because I have a couple, but I've been talking a lot, so. Okay.
For clarification for me for FF&E, where are you seeing the abbreviations on the budgets? Because that's the only thing I'm not seeing.
So it's 600. No, that's not right. I'm looking at it's systems and equipment, 750.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, my apologies.
So I noticed that sales and marketing didn't appear in the original budget. Can you speak to that?
So the Titans looked at this, and originally, I believe they had some in other buckets. There was some realignment. They did not put a lot into this budget. They were doing a lot of things operationally on their side. But they looked at this and said, we need to put money in this budget for certain milestone activities, celebrations. If you've heard of topping out parties or other large milestones where there's a reason to kind of come together and do some things that's project specific, not sales and marketing as far as seat sales or anything like that. So
one other question that I have under 900, insurance, financing, and transaction costs. As we anticipate a change in interest rates going forward, are financing costs potentially coming down? Would that then come back pro rata to the participants in this effort, or that just gets...
Dan.
Well, and let me say before Dan talks, so
I love asking questions that require other people to come up. I feel like I've scored.
Our financing costs are what they are.
Okay.
You issued fixed rate long-term bonds. They are what they are. He can speak to their financing costs.
Hey everyone, Dan Worley with the Titans. Our financing costs are also locked in at this point. So if they were to come down, we just had some unfortunate timing on when we locked those in. But we're pretty locked in on this, and you'll see that number represents a significant savings in the project budget, which had to do with some of the timing of the financing, as well as finding some significant savings in the insurance bucket with the way that we structured our insurance program.
Thank you. Any other questions from... Okay, please continue.
Those were the things I wanted to highlight in the budget, just because those were the big needle movers. So if there aren't any other questions, we'll keep going.
And I don't want to belabor this, but just make sure to point out. So sometimes we talk about the big B budget, and the big B budget is their number there in the bottom middle, 2.2. The GMP, just so we're all on the same page, the GMP is embedded in line 700, and so. Heather said, I think the bulk of the project budget is the GMP, but there are other, let's just take one, infrastructure. Those are going to be pursuant to construction contracts.
Absolutely. Some of those are done, where we, had to do some utility relocations and things like that. But some of the future. We'll hear a little bit on 2nd Street, which is a major realignment and part of the project. That is a budget item right now, as that contractor's not yet been brought on. But that all hits the infrastructure line. Now,
So I think it's back to me, but I don't want. This is an important point, and so please ask any questions if you got any.
Continue. We'll ask.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So if you want to go to the next slide, so sort of back to the whole funding release date concept. It's all about developing that final budget. What's this whole thing going to cost? And the thing that has to be matched up with it is confirmation and assurance that the team has the ability to fund their piece of this, and their piece of it is the part that's not being funded by the Sports Authority and the state, and cost overruns. That's a critically important point. And so, just like in August of 23, so in August of 23, Inner Circle Sports, and by the way, we have David Abrams here from Inner Circle Sports who can answer questions. Inner Circle and Greenberg reviewed financing commitments at the time, term sheets from both banks and the NFL that, based on the original budget, assured them that the team could meet their share of the budget plus cost overruns. They have sort of brought down that diligence, and the financing hasn't changed. It's just sort of evolved from term sheets to real live final financing documents. And so there are 2 letters in your binder from Inner Circle and Greenberg that look a lot like the letters they gave you in August of 23, but now the financing is final, and now it's been matched up. That sufficiency analysis is matched up against that final budget and the Titans' final share plus cost overruns that we just talked about. So that's the companion piece of this that we need to think about as we think about the funding release date. So next slide. So I've already jumped ahead on this one and told you what this is and what this isn't. So you're not done. You've still got oversight and review rights. So we can go on from there. So let's go. This sort of the next slide. Sort of 2 additional matters, and the first one is memorandum of understanding. So the basis for this document, and I said it a minute ago, is that we've got here we are. We're pretty much done, but not fully done, and it's a sprawling project. And we sort of, about a month ago, 2 months ago, said, well, what if there are things that are in the budget, in the plans, that we're not fully signed off on, but we think are complete enough, reflected in the budget enough, that we're completely comfortable from a funding and release date perspective, but that we want to put an asterisk on to say, hey, there are a couple of things here we're not signed off on yet, we've still got to sort out. And so the first concept in this memorandum of understanding is put an asterisk around 2 things. And I'll say, when we started this 2 months ago, I think we expected this list to be longer, and to everybody's credit, it's shorter. And the 2 things this is an Exhibit A to the memorandum of understanding that's identified as open items. And so there are 2. One is sort of the way the building on the south side, the edge of it, how it go to
the next slide. No, you keep going. I wanted
Jeff, before we move on,
Sure.
just to clarify, when you say put an asterisk by, does that mean that at some point potentially the cost will be out of whatever realm of expectation we're establishing today, and you would come back to us for some additional approval?
2 things. From a budget perspective, each of these items, the team has built into the budget enough to cover the greater of costs. So no matter how these items are solved, we have a budget that works. That was important. And so if you read let me go to the right section. So Section 5 of the MOU says, hey, an important part of this is these are open items, but we're good for today because you've included them in the budget. And thankfully, these two items actually are pretty small in the budget, but they are specifically in the budget. So this is not a budget item, and these are not things, frankly, that drive. I mean, the stadium's not. It'll be fine, one with the other. But these are approval rights. So we got two things.
We have one other question.
Sure.
For clarification, you said we're good for today, so I want to make sure we articulate this better for people who are listening.
Sure.
So when we hit this GMP, it's maxed out, right? Once we make that decision. And then anything else beyond the point of approval goes to Titans, correct?
That's right.
All right, so when these open items and this MOU here and these asterisks, we're already budgeted correctly for them.
That's
correct?
right.
So there won't be any coming back to.
No.
All right, for clarification.
No.
Thank you.
And in fact, we believe that, and what this MOU says is, if these items are resolved in the way that's reflected, basically amendment proposed by the authority, there's no need to come back, because you're saying, if we get our way, we're good.
Right.
And if we get our way, to the extent that there are any additional costs, we've confirmed that they're already in the budget. So if there are additional costs because of item A, it's not even a cost overrun. It's in the budget. So
Right.
You want to talk about what those two things are?
Absolutely. And as Jeff mentioned, they line out, and I'll talk through kind of what we're saying. Hey, you don't have to come back as far as a design approval, right? Budget's in there, but as any kind of design approval, because this is what we feel like is the direction. And so this first one, and we've got a map pulled up, and you'll see it kind of to the right side of the page. It's called Elevated 100-Foot Plaza. So basically, just kind of walk you through it. The plaza that comes off that side of the Titans Stadium, as it relates to Parcel C, is higher. Now, we all know at some point that Parcel C is going to get built. We don't know what yet or anything like that, but it was important for all of us, as we looked at the plans, as we looked at the budget, that it wasn't just assumed that you could slope the soil to prop up that sidewalk, right? You'd have to have something there to keep the sidewalk from wanting to fall in. What we've talked to the Titans with, and what is included in the budget, is some kind of, and I'm not a structural engineer, but some kind of supporting wall, so that whoever comes in on Parcel C can just go and do what they need to do without then building a wall and then starting their project. So we did not want to encumber what would happen and what was going on in Parcel C. So that money has been put in the budget to build something to hold that plaza up, so that no matter what's happening in C, it's good to go.
Now, the
Right.
Parcel C is still part of the project area. It is not something that Bob Mendez's office is working on separate.
That is part of the Fallon.
The initial development area. That's right.
The second one is a bioretention. So this comes in with stormwater and lid. It takes care of, it's speaking to the stormwater quality. So one of the ways you take care of that is through a bioretention. Currently in the plans that we're putting in front of you today, show that on Parcel C. Same issue. We don't want to encumber Parcel C, so we've said we've got to relocate that. Due to timing and everything else that was going on, we as a team, big team, knew that would not get settled by this. So we said, okay, what is a reasonable budget to put this in one of these other locations while we continue to figure this out? That's what's going on here.
And then let me talk about Exhibit B. And I think the way to, so Exhibit B are not even open items. The way I guess I'd talk about Exhibit B is to remind us all that the Imagine East Bank plan that was sort of, long public process. This is a new, largely Metro-owned neighborhood, and there's been a ton of investment in making sure that what we're doing here, this is an anchor tenant, sort of fits with that. And so the planning department on your behalf has been really, you can sort of tell from Exhibit B how engaged they've been in the look and the feel of the perimeter of the building to make sure that that it fits, and is consistent with what everybody wants in Imagine East Bank. And so Exhibit B, I mean, if you look at the lead in to every subsection is the authority is satisfied. So these are not disputed items at all, but they're items really from a sort of an exterior perimeter design planning focus where we just wanted to make doggone sure that that we still had collaboration going on these items, so this thing has the look and the feel that we want in a way consistent with Imagine East Bank. So that's what these things are. Heather can probably speak to some of them if you want to. They all, I think I've described them accurately.
Absolutely, I would agree. I'm happy to walk through them if you guys want to hear the specifics on them. That helpful? Okay. So South Plaza, as earmarked there on the map, that is one where planning, Titans, their design team, we've all been in rooms working through making sure that it is a welcoming space, but also a purposeful space for events, for Titans, for whoever, and but still a welcoming, open green space for the public when there's non-events. So really the last kind of piece of the puzzle that's still just kind of going back and forth, and again, this is more of a timing than anybody saying no, we won't, or yes, we will. It's just figuring out, making sure any fencing or gates that are permanent, a lot of things will be more of a temporary on the north side or page left of the South Plaza, but on page right, between them and Fallon, we wanted to make sure, again, that this is an open, inviting from all angles. And so the fence and the gates are just kind of a question mark. And they're continuing to pass ideas back and forth. Budget is there. And we're expected to come to, consensus on that. And in fact, planning has provided some pretty good direction for the design team, and they're working on it.
Including a playful and welcoming design.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bollards, this is just something that as we continue to look at the perimeter aesthetic, but also the security and just the integration of those two things, it's just a kind of an open point that is just, again, still being discussed between the what the needs are, and obviously we want a secure and safe perimeter, but also what's the best way to do that? And again, discussions continue, but budget is in there. Second Street design, as I mentioned, is a pretty large. It's the yellow highlighted there at the bottom of the page. There's still as far as the look and feel, I believe we're pretty close, if not there. We're still talking through the utilities that would go under that road. And again, the budget's there. But as you can imagine, understanding and thinking through the future needs of the adjacent area when it's not already under construction or fully designed, that's just taking a little bit of time. But that is what's earmarked there. Second Street Garage is one that we just wanted to understand. City planning wanted to understand what that access looked like, because we know Second Street's going to be a festival street. It's going to be pedestrian friendly, having an access in and out from the garage. How is that even going to work? Understanding from the Titans, that's really more operational access. So when we talk about getting temporary barriers or just maintenance of that side of the building, being able to get in and out of the garage with their facility vehicles. A northwest facade mural, there's a pretty large space of wall that I think we're all just looking at potential mural ideas or activation ideas for that area. Again, we want this to be part of, and the Titans do too, a part of the neighborhood and really feel the energy all the way around it. And that kind of comes into play with the southwest elevation as well.
So that's Exhibit B. And let me say something about this memorandum of understanding. So Exhibit A, I think, sort of is a funding release date matter. And when I say that, I say you are being asked to approve plans that show things one way, and we are saying, as to that plaza wall, and as to bioretention, we don't approve those elements, and we want them sorted out, but you've covered them in the budget. So stop there. Exhibit B has nothing to do with the funding release date because we agree. The next two things I'm getting to talk about also have nothing to do with the funding release date. You might go, well, why are they in this memorandum of understanding? Well, at some point, we needed them to sign something. We already had a document they were going to sign. We threw them in. So that's what's going on. But I don't want to confuse either Exhibit B or these next two items as being funding release date matters. But they're in here and they're important. I want to talk about them. I want to go to Section 9 of the body of the memorandum of understanding. Heather already alluded to this. The development agreement requires that that Second Street, that all infrastructure necessary to get the stadium open is built.
Did you say
We don't have a
section 9?
section 9 in the MOU.
It's the paragraph 9 on page 2.
Paragraph 8.
We got an 8, not 9.
We need to. It's easy enough to. You want to. We can do whatever you want. It's just one paragraph, and there's nothing else to it. Let's get a.
Activate the microphone.
Oh, haven't said anything. We're activating.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell you what's in Section 9, and then you're going to get it. And you can read it for yourself.
You do it from memory now that we're
Yeah, I mean it's not overly complicated. So the development agreement says the team will fund all infrastructure necessary to get the stadium open. The plans that they have submitted absolutely check that box. End of story. You may recall in August of 23, there was a separate campus-related agreement called the Site Coordination Agreement. That agreement, which is being amended now, is really just between Metro as the owner of all the perimeter property and the stadium, says separate and apart from the stadium development project, we're going to cut a deal on how Second Street is going to look, and it's going to be enhanced and more than just necessary to get the stadium open, but it's going to be a complete street and utilities and stuff like that. So there is no dispute about whether the team has checked the box for development agreement, funding release date purposes. But the plans they've submitted, we still have things we're discussing about whether everything is in Second Street and consistent with that separate site coordination agreement. So Section 9, which you're getting ready to read, and I'm sorry you don't have it, Section 9 says, for the development agreement purposes, we're good to go. For site coordination purposes, we've still got things to work out. And that actually that's not even this board.
That's the city.
That's the city. That's right.
So while we've got a minute, we approve this resolution today.
Yeah.
Does this then go to city council or the mayor's office, or what is?
No, it's really we already have an agreement between the city and Statco, and it's just really working out compliance with the terms of that agreement. So there's nothing to amend. There's no new agreement. It's just we've not yet fully confirmed that what they have proposed complies with the terms of the agreement that we're already a party to.
Understood.
That's it.
I have a quick question.
Yes,
just while we're interested, got a couple minutes. Second Street garage, what will that be used for? Is that where they load in? Or
So the garage it's just another access point to their garage. It's just that we were concerned with vehicular activity coming in and out on Second Street, knowing what the purpose of Second Street is. So it just is an access point for them to get their facility vehicles in and out of the garage without going what the other entrances are to the back side of the building.
Okay. And just to answer your question directly, it's a relatively small garage. It's located under that side of the building. That's about 170 spaces that will be used primarily for player parking on game days.
where's the event load in for?
It's off Interstate Drive.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a loading dock that comes down and up along the top of the screen right there, as you can see it right there on the east side of the building.
So I want to give you all a minute to read section 9. I hope it's
A quick question, Jeff.
Sure.
Yeah, so just to kind of expound on what Dan was saying, as far as number 9, we're saying that we still have, we're talking more about infrastructure permitting and zoning and that sort of a thing, as opposed to like city council literally, approving anything.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
this has no city
Right.
council approval
Right, yeah.
implications at all.
Yeah, so this is more about, like it says here, utility infrastructure, correct?
Yeah, this
Okay.
is us just making sure that we're getting what the city council did approve. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Everybody good on paragraph 9?
And I apologize for that not being in there. So then let's back up to sort of section 8. Section 8 sort of also is in the same category as section 9. This is not a funding release date matter. There is no design dispute. There is no construction plan dispute. There is no budget dispute.
Okay.
But it's sort of acknowledging a fact and a mutual commitment to work toward a solution. And so if you look at the map, what our section 8 is talking about is Interstate Drive, and sort of specifically, if you look, I don't know if you've got the map of the building, and then the top left, which is the northeast corner, the stadium, and this is true, and you correct me if I go astray here, true of every NFL stadium, has a mandatory 100-foot security perimeter. That security perimeter in that northeast corner overlaps Interstate Drive entirely. You can see that dotted red line. So as a result, from a safety and security perspective, Interstate Drive during events and some limited period of time, sort of before and after load in, load out, people in, people out, will have to be closed. I would say sort of so that's sort of an acknowledged fact. And then sort of, I guess more importantly, is sort of the commitments that everybody is sort of agreed to make. And when I say everybody, really this is sort of Metro and the team. This is more of a site coordination matter, not a sports authority matter. And when you read section 8, it sort of goes on at length to say this is really about Metro, not the sports authority. So again, not a funding release date matter. But sort of if you go to Exhibit C are sort of the summary of commitments that people are making about Interstate Drive. And the first 4 probably just bear reading. The only time that's ever going to be closed is in connection with a stadium event. Otherwise, it's open, full time.
Stadium events, regardless of whether they're NFL events.
Yeah, so anything, and I think, again, I get the standard wrong, I think anything over 20,000 people.
It would be closed.
It would be closed.
That's going to happen a lot.
So I think the consultant's report, I think if we go back to the bond issue, I think projected roughly, 45 events
Annually.
of that magnitude a year. Number 2 is we're going to minimize the duration of that. So let's don't extend that out pre and post event any more than necessary. Number 3 is, if you look at this map, if you look in the top right, that is it green or what? Green or blue? Some kind of shade of parcel C. Parcel C is part of the initial development area. That development area needs access on Interstate Drive, and so the commitment is that it would be Interstate Drive. From Shelby going north would be open as a 2-way in and out, and it sort of doesn't get to the 100-foot perimeter on that end. That would be open. That's number 3. Number 4 is those 2 hotels, on the other side of Interstate Drive would always have access. 5 through 7, in a lawyerly way, say the team is on the hook for the operational and the capital, any additional operational and capital costs needed, necessary to make all this security apparatus happen. And 8 is we're gonna work in good faith to to sort of figure out other solutions if there are any, and a lot of work's gone into this. I got to sort of sum up some of that. There are some things we know. That Interstate Drive for safety and security reasons needs to be closed, as does 2nd Street. That will also be the case. Long term, sort of back to Imagine East Bank for a minute. Imagine East Bank imagines, I guess, sort of two things I'd point out. One is a north-south boulevard that will run really along the boundary of the existing stadium. And when that is installed, that is a north-south street that will always be open, even during events. And the other thing that Imagine East Bank sort of imagines is a method of getting around that involves fewer cars. And so, from a long-term perspective, there are a lot of stuff going on that will address any issue. Short-term, I think everybody is committed to making sure that that the neighborhoods around here don't have any adverse impact from where we are today, and that we have solutions to this that keep things as or better than they are today. And we're gonna keep working on it, and we're gonna try to minimize the period of time around events that it's closed. So that's what I'm gonna stop there. Ask any questions you want to ask. That's the end of the MOU. But specifically, if you got Interstate Drive questions, now would be the time to ask them. Did I leave anything out?
I think so. That was good.
Sure.
On the Interstate Drive questions, how are we communicating that? Do we have that anywhere listed when it's going to be closed during construction for the neighborhoods, specifically for the neighborhoods?
I don't believe we have any plan on during construction. It's all after opening.
And one thing I'll say before he answers this is, one bit of good news is we've got about 3 years to work out. I mean, this is not something we've got to solve tomorrow, but we got to start. We are already started. We got to work to solve it and have a really good plan in place for that and everything else in February of 27. Okay. So less than 3 years.
Yeah, there's no plan to close that road during events currently. It falls far enough away from our current building where it's not an issue for the next few years here.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth noting that this wasn't an oversight. If you look at the design of the building today, and you guys have probably seen it over the side, we're really close to our current building today. And just sort of the site layout led to this being a necessity, along with wanting to help create opportunities to have neighborhoods on both sides of it as well. So when you look at Parcel C, if we were to turn the building, basically that all goes away.
Right.
So this is something that's been, measured twice, cut once during this process, and nobody wants that to happen, but it is sort of a necessity. I'd also add that it's pretty typical for roads surrounding an NFL facility to have to be closed during those time periods, and we're committed to minimizing that impact as much as possible.
Winston, you had a question.
I think you really answered my question, but the question I had was there a possibility to widen the road or to move it, I guess what was that, north, because I can't tell what's there, but has that been discussed?
I think it's fair to say almost every option has and is continuing to be evaluated on that, and that's one of them. They're all there are complications to all of them, but I think everything's on the table, and that's sort of the things that we would talk about in the next 2.5 years.
Does Metro own that land on the north side?
No.
Privately owned. There's 2 hotels right there that you probably have seen. Yeah.
Aaron, you had a question.
First of all, thank you. You're really just knocking it out the park, answering all of my questions. And so, any chance of a bridge?
It's officially above my pay grade.
No, but in all seriousness, I did appreciate you just stating that it wasn't an oversight. My concerns around this is, how does the public interact on game day, on concert night, etc. And so just knowing that and Metro is committed to this as well, that gives me a vote of confidence. So thank you.
Thank you. Kim?
And just to clarify, what is the NFL requirement for the time period for the closure? Is it once an event starts, 2 hours before, or is it just?
Yeah. I believe it's like 3 hours before and about an hour and a half, 2 hours after.
Okay, for any large event over 20,000 that would be in the facility.
Yeah, and those are NFL requirements, and so there is a little bit separate consideration for those concerts and things like that. We're not necessarily under NFL. We're also planning to be a Safety Act compliant building, which we will apply for once the building is completed. And along with that, we have to make commitments such as those things to all of our major events that happen. And so we would typically, the Safety Act follows NFL best practices. Those things are aligned. So we would be pretty similar for other events as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Back to you guys.
So unless Heather thinks that we've missed something, I think the thing, my next thing to do would be to round back to where we started and go back to the resolution and just sort of make sure that we've covered all our bases. And I mean, at the risk of being just, sort of reading through the list, I think it's important enough that we ought to do that. You are approving the 50% construction plans that Heather sent to you and that she described. You are approving the GMP amendment to the construction management agreement that she sent to you and that we've described. You are approving the MOU that we just described. You are approving the project budget that is in the coming letter that you have. And by the way, I guess the record needs to reflect. I'm now telling Josh how to do his business. Make sure you get Section 9 in the MOU. Sorry. And so then in Section 5 and 6, we are saying yes, we are satisfied with the evidence that we have been presented about funding satisfaction, and that the funding release date, the conditions to the funding release date have been met. That's that. And so that then leads me to the one last thing, the catch-up achievement amount. That's an Exhibit C to your resolution. And again, this is sort of the backstory for this is everybody's got to fund monthly pro rata. But the team has already spent, and you'll see on Exhibit C, $187 million and change on these are all project budget costs. So, one thing just as an aside, when you think about, comfort level on the budget, we pointed out that the infrastructure number of about $100 million is outside the GMP. 30 million of that's already been spent. And so we're down the road a ways on some of those items. So
Jeff, what's our portion of the catch-up in terms of dollars?
So 187 is what the team has spent to date. And so we're required then to say to the construction funds trustee, okay, hey, they've spent 187. So the next 187 has to come from us in the state until we hit 187. And then once we hit 187, then we're all pro rata. That's
because we're equal pro rata partners with the team.
That's right. Yeah.
Not equal pro rata.
Not equal pro rata. But we have to zero out before we start going pro rata. And right now they're 187 million ahead.
All right. So let me ask this question: of that 187 that we being the authority and the state need to invest to catch up, how much of that is coming out of the 760? How much of that is the state's?
So it's the percentage. So it's pro rata in proportion to the state and the Metro Sports Authority contribution. So our 760 versus their 500, there is a percentage somewhere, and it's it's roughly like I don't know 64. It's whatever that math is.
So we're roughly 60-something% of the catch-up.
And until we have collectively funded 187, at which point this number is zeroed out, and from that point forward, it is pro rata in proportion to 760, 500 PSL
so after the
balance.
Funding date, our 760 contribution, the remaining will be something 640.
Yeah, so you're going to make me do math, and I'm going to mess it up. So we're going to let's say we're 100 of that 187, and the state is the 87. The next 187 million of requisitions we'll fund, and so we will eat into 100 of our 760 and have 660 left once we've caught up.
not to be a stickler on this point,
Sure.
but does somebody have that number? I mean, 648. Thank you. I knew you'd have it, Dan.
60.3%. We are 60.3%. So until we catch up, and this is all, again, part of the roadmap. This was all sort of part of the original deal, and it's just math and certifications now. And for what it's worth, the Metro Finance Department has been working with Shannon Myers on a monthly basis to vouch for these numbers. So we're not just relying on them without diligence.
Okay, go ahead.
As we go from 50 to 100% on the drawings, are there any major concerns about things that we might run into?
No, they're not. Like I said, it's in for permit, meaning we think this set is good to go. I apologize, the 100% set is, but it is based on the work of the 50% and those two addendums. We do not have any major concerns that there's going to be a material difference for budget.
Cummins' recommendation to us is to pass the resolution.
That is correct.
In the interest of time, I know Chad likes to run his meetings like clockwork, so we've got 13 minutes until he kicks off. But are there any other questions of the authority? Anything else that you guys think we need to know? Great. Well, with that, anybody wants to make a motion, I'd be thrilled with that.
And Chair Hogan, if I can just remind, this is a Finance Committee meeting, so it does need to come from the Finance Committee.
Okay, anybody right here? So moved?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of passing the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes. I think that concludes our agenda. So with that, we will go to full board at 10:30, unless there's any other comments. We're done.
Good job.